Hello, everybody, and welcome once again. This is Syracuse football postgame. You got Brent Axe. You got Emily Leiker. You got a 42-14 win over Holy Cross for the Orange. They are now 3-1. They have wrapped a 4-game set at the JMA Wireless Dome and now get ready to go on the road for a pretty long time here for the second straight year. No home games for us in October, Emily. Vegas awaits. Very exciting news about that, by the way, for our Syracuse Sports Insiders and anybody that wants to come, by the way. We're doing a meetup in Vegas. You know what? While we're at while I'm remembering here, let's give a little plug. If you are going to be in Vegas, we would love to see you. We are doing a meetup at the Rock House and Oak Room Bar at the Venetian, right on the Strip in Vegas, 5 o'clock on Thursday, October 3rd. We're going to get together. We're going to have some drinks. We're going to have some food. We're going to talk Syracuse football. We're going to just hang in Vegas, baby, Vegas, because that's where we're going to be next week. So put that on your calendar. If you're going to be in Vegas, we would love to see our Syracuse Sports Insiders or anybody that wants to swing by and come hang and talk some Syracuse football. So we got that plug off the bat there as we anticipate our trip to Vegas next week. I anticipate to hear from our Syracuse Sports Insiders. I anticipate a voicemail from Florida. Thankfully, our friend Rock and Ron is safe. The hurricane did not affect him on his side of the state of Florida, but we're certainly thinking of everybody down there that's just dealing with a heck of a lot, not only in Florida, but in the southern part of the United States that was affected by the hurricane. Emily, I have many thoughts on this game. Okay? If I could have the floor just for a minute, and then you tell me if I'm just completely a wacko or if I'm onto something here. What I want you to do when it comes to this football game, not you specifically, Emily, I just in general, I think we need to ignore the final score. I don't care what the score was. I don't care what the margin of victory was. What I am most interested in is the how Syracuse played this football game. In particular, how they played it in the trenches against Holy Cross, an average, vanilla, basic FCS team that is now 1-4. This is not when App State back in the day was, challenging the Michigans of the world. This is not North Dakota State. This is not a team that is to be feared. Even the Holy Cross under Bob Chesney, which was pretty darn good and won a few Patriot League titles as soon as last year. This is not a good football team that came into the Dome today. And I did not see the true domination that I feel like Syracuse should have had, particularly in the trenches of this football game. And that's what concerns me when I look at this and I say, how did you not do this to that team? There were certainly some very positive things to talk about, as we will get into here. But my big takeaway from this game, Emily, is this team did not dominate Holy Cross physically the way they need to. And remember how upset Fran Brown got at Brent Key, Georgia Tech. You're challenging us, and we're a Northeast football team, and we're tough, and we're physical. I didn't see that today against a team they should have pushed all over the floor for 4 quarters. Am I crazy that that's my big takeaway from this game, or you tell me?
No, I think that's the right takeaway, right? And I think we'll probably get into it a little bit more. And I know, like in writing, I'm going to get into it tonight, and the story will probably end up going tomorrow. But certainly the players had that takeaway as well, right? Like we heard a lot of this is Q's versus Q's, like these were our mistakes, like we had issues here. But the phrase I kept coming back to it, like writing the gamer and then writing my first sidebar of the night, which was about Meeks and Allen doing really well, was that like this was like an anecdotally poor game. Like this was a game where if you were there and you were watching it, you knew that it was not the game it was supposed to be, and that it didn't look great, and that a lot of things went wrong, and you did not leave the Dome feeling like you should have after a 42-14 win. But if you glance at the stats and you just look at the box score, like things look like they were business as usual. Like it was a 500-yard game for the offense, and Jackson Meeks had 10 catches for 161 yards and all of this. But being there and being in the room, we know that those numbers don't tell the complete story of what happened today.
And that's the point I really want to make, because this game was not on television. This game was on ESPN Plus. And if you're somebody that it was we're talking about the sold out thing at the Dome today, because that was kind of like, those people on the streets in New York City that trick you with the 3 cups. Like, I think we got bamboozled a little bit on the sold out thing. Technically, it did sell out, but certainly all those seats were not occupied. I'll just put it to you that way. But we heard about that narrative, and so if you were there, you know this and you're feeling this. If you watch the game on ESPN Plus and went out of your way to find some kind of feed to watch it, you have this feeling. But you brought up a good point. If you're just kind of driving by and you're like, oh, I couldn't watch the game today. Oh, yeah, look at that. They won by 28 and they had 500 yards and Kyle McCord had 300 yards. And it wasn't that kind of game. And Emily, I think we've got to be careful, because in football, more than any sport, you spend a week kind of talking yourself into a narrative, right? And then when that doesn't go exactly according to plan, you're like, well, oh my God, what happened? Well, I think in this case, you have every right to feel that way. There's a certain way this game should go. It didn't. And I think it, at the very least, puts up a few red flags to see, well, when are these things going to shape out the way they should? And now, as we noted, they're going on the road for a month. They've got some tough games in that stretch. And you brought up that Syracuse versus Syracuse narrative that a few players brought up. And as you mentioned, you're going to write more about that. And I look forward to reading that story. Do they have that in them? I think they do. I'm just surprised we didn't see it as much as, frankly, we should have. On the offensive side of the ball, I think the defense recovered, bared down, and they had a much more encouraging second half than a first half here. But I think this is the kind of game you strip away a lot of the fancy things that look big and you focus on, did you really do the job you need to against a team like this? And I don't think they got there. They got the win, and you can give me all the cliches in the world here, but I think that's the big takeaway you have to walk away from in this game.
Yeah, I think if there's one, I mean, there are a couple things that went right in this game, right? But I think if there's like one silver lining to the mess itself, and this is kind of something I said after Stanford too, is that this is the type of game that I think would have gotten away from the past 2 years Syracuse's teams.
Yes.
In that second quarter,
Fair
when
point.
all of a sudden Holy Cross came for back-to-back touchdowns and Syracuse is trying to run a 2-minute drill. They're perfect on 2-minute drills so far this season, which is definitely something we did not see the past 2 years. They never ran 2-minute drills. So like, I know that is hard to like contextualize and like think about, but and like consider coming out of this. But like when I think back, like I just think back to how difficult a lot of last year's second halves were to watch. And as much as like there were still lots of errors in the second half, and that third quarter in particular was really rough, and they could not finish drives and all the missed kicks, like you said, the defense stepped up and was able to hold things there, and Kyle and company did go down and put a few more points on the board late. So that's kind of like my one silver lining is like, I do think if this was the past 2 years teams, they would have been in a deeper hole by the end of this game, or the stat line would have looked different.
So you see the difference between, and that's a fair comparison to make, obviously, with a new coach and trying to take them forward from some of those things. There was improvement in that category. I think Fran calling that timeout at the end of the first half, that was kind of weird. I was getting some Dino vibes from that one, but I'll let that slide. So the other reason I wanted to bring that up is not just, like we were talking about with the narratives and everything that builds through the week. There's a certain thing with this type of game, Emily. We talked, so you had Georgia Tech, you had Stanford, 2 ACC games already. Ohio was kind of we can't look past them, but a team you should beat type of opponent if you're Syracuse. This is a game where you shouldn't see the challenges that you did, right? So I've hit that point 100 times, yes. And I just wanted to get that out there.
And I agree.
Right.
We try to balance each other on this.
We do. There were some things that went right, and I do want to bring those up because there were some great performances today that are encouraging for Syracuse. But while Grandpa's in a bad mood here, there's a couple other things I got to bring up. Number one is, if you've seen Oronde Gadsden, please tell him to report to the JMA Wireless Dome.
Yeah, it's been rough.
It's been a rough couple of games for him. And This is Holy Cross. I don't care if Holy Cross quadruple teams Oronde Gadsden. He should have more than a catch for 4 yards. So I'm concerned, Emily, and I asked Fran after the game. I says, is there something wrong with him? Is he hurt? And Fran's like, no, unless you know something, I don't. OG's getting double teamed. He got beat up by Stanford last week, and I get the frustration with the extra attention that he's getting, but there was plenty of times today the ball came his way, and he didn't get it. Drops. Single coverage. Now, there were times McCord, and why wouldn't you focus on Jackson Meeks? The guy had a huge game, 160 yards, and was the primary hot topic today.
Right.
Hot target, I should say, today. So you ride the hot hand. I get that. But there is no way on God's green earth that Oronde Gadsden should have a catch for 4 yards against Holy Cross. So I'm now concerned that there's something more to this. Right? I don't want to speculate on an injury, but something is off with his play. Something's off with his body language. Something's off with just the whole thing. And look, Kyle McCord said it after the game that he's too good and works too hard. And I will do what I can. I'm paraphrasing here, but I will do what I can to get him the football. Fran said the same thing, that he's working through it. But Emily, the biggest compliment that Fran Brown had for OG after this game was, man, how well he blocked. And we ran. Did you see how much we ran to his side? Now, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that about OG in this game. Okay. That's not why he's on the field. I get that it's part of his position, and they really emphasized and worked on his blocking. He's going to need to do that in the National Football League. But Jeff Nixon has got to find out what's wrong there and fix it, because this offense does not function to its highest capacity without him involved.
Yeah, in the Stanford game, he had a penalty against him. I believe it was on special teams. And a couple texters, I believe, sent in like, oh, it looks like he's going to shoot out on the sideline, or maybe it was Nate watching the broadcast. I don't remember which, but I asked him about that. I talked to him on Tuesday. I was like, did that like get in your head? What was said there? And he was like, no, like, no one told me like that was necessarily a bad play. I think what it was that he ran into the like returner late or something like that, or got flagged for like running into him late when it was kind of like a 50-50 play. So we kind of thought it was mental last week, and he seemed to shut that down. I think I would still probably lean that it's a mental thing, whether it is just the difficulty of, it is tough to like want to be the big guy. And they all say he doesn't want to be the big guy, and
but he needs to be.
But it's
right?
tough to do that and not be doing it. So it will be interesting to see how they handle that moving forward. And, you're right. Like, there's a point every game where, like, they did try him early multiple times, and then the rest of the game, Kyle tended to turn to someone else because he couldn't trust Oronde to catch it. So will definitely be an interesting situation to watch moving forward.
Yes.
And see if it's just something he shakes off, or if we hear that something specific has been done to help him shake it off. But I think that'll be something we continue to see unfold.
All right. You said the term, Emily. So look, there's one more thing grinding my gears here, and that is special teams is a liability, folks. This is a problem. Okay. There is going to be a time that you are going to have to rely on your kicker. You're going to have to rely on your kicking game to rescue you, to get points in the red zone, you need a kicker. And Syracuse, I'm going to say this as gently as I can, but Brady Denneberg is really struggling. He had one block today, a 28-yard kick, a 45-yarder that I don't know if they got a piece of that one as well, Emily, but he flat out shanked that thing. Then the backup comes in. I forget O's first name. Remind me. Jaden O. He comes in, and you couldn't write the script any better. He doinks it off the upright. Yeah. You missed 3 kicks indoors today. You had 2 penalties on special teams, one of which wiped out a really good Trevor Pena punt return. So that's what I'm talking about, guys.
There was another that wiped out the really good Davian Kerr one that we saw towards the end.
Right, yes. They did get some young guys in the game much later than we thought they would in this game. I thought we'd be seeing everybody in the third quarter. Good point there. Special teams is a problem. It is a liability, right? Jack Stonehouse had a great punt that pinned Holy Cross at the 1, and when Syracuse actually needed to get a defensive stand and get some momentum going here. So that's something that it's 1/3 of the game. I love to say special teams matter. They do. It's field position. You got to bank those points. Maybe you get away with that against Holy Cross, but you're not going to get away with that against better teams. And again, Emily, it goes back to my emphasis here in this game. And guys, I promise we are going to talk about some good things here, but you can't do that against Holy Cross indoors in your own stadium. Like, there's a issue here, and the issue, I guess, is do they have anybody to fix it? We haven't seen enough of O to know the answer to that question. We did not see a ton of special teams during camp, and we had that access, and maybe there was a reason for that because it is a real work in progress.
I'll say we never see special teams. Like 3 years of me being on this beat, we've never watched
never
special
seen
teams
it
at camp.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I don't think I don't think there was anything to that. But it was bad. It was certainly not great. I mean, that's why you have a dome in central New York, is so that the environment doesn't affect you and that you should be able to clear those things pretty easily. I'm willing to give Jaden O a little bit of it was his first time out. He probably was not expecting to go out there. I believe he's a walk-on. I don't even think he's on scholarship. So like, I'm willing to wait and see if they continue playing him and what he's able to do in that regard. He did clear a PAT. But yeah, and this isn't the first game they've struggled on special teams either.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was the Georgia Tech game. It certainly wasn't last game against Stanford. I believe it was the Georgia Tech game. There were also some issues. So that's another thing we're just gonna have to monitor going into this interesting part of the season where they're on the road a lot, and obviously none of those, well, most of those road locations do not have roofs over them.
Right, exactly. To get a 5th game in a row indoors when we're in Vegas next week. But again, that's field position. That Pena, take away that punt, that field position in a tighter game in the second half at NC State even, and I know NC State's not what we thought they would be, but on the road in the ACC, that's going to hurt you. You get away with it against Holy Cross, but you're supposed to, sharpen that, clean that up, be efficient against Holy Cross, whereas it has gone the opposite way there. So there are some concerns here, folks, but let me turn the tide here because there were some really good things to discuss in this game. Emily, a lot of the flaws we're talking about can be hidden by the fact you've got a really good quarterback. And I know Kyle McCord threw a couple picks today, and I'm not excusing that. There was one at the end of the first half. They were just kind of running one last play. They got the ball back. He chucked it down whatever. That's basically a punt. The second pick, that's not your best throw. But this is the 4th game he's had 300-plus yards, which we're now taking for granted that Kyle McCord is going to have 300 yards.
Right.
He made some NFL-level throws today, on the money, through double coverage. Jackson Meeks, the biggest recipient of that. You brought it up earlier. He had 160 yards today. He had a touchdown, and just throwing the numbers out here. 10 catches, 161 yards. His longest catch was 38. Just a terrific game for the Georgia transfer, and we've been kind of waiting for that Jackson Meeks game, which is important with the struggles OG's going through, number one, and the fact, number two, that Zede Haynes is still not with this team due to what's being, as we're told, personal reasons and family issues. So when you have a good quarterback who maybe scrambled a little bit too much today than he should have against Holy Cross and got sacked a couple times more than he should have against Holy Cross, which he should get sacked 0 times against Holy Cross, frankly, but he makes up for a lot of deficiencies, Emily. I mean, you just saw it on display again today.
Yeah, I was texting a friend post game and they were like, what's going on with the drops? Like kind of all of this. And, certainly some of the drops are on the receivers. Some of them are on McCord. But I think like my general sentiment around McCord's worst plays, which there were a couple that were completely him. The time he threw it straight into the defender, I was like, Kyle, what is going on? That was a very bad play. And luckily it was an incomplete, and LeQuint scooped the ball up there and showed good kind of football IQ and what to do, but they got away with that just being an incomplete. But most of the time that Kyle's making a bad pass, it's because he's under pressure, which means it's the O-line's fault and not Kyle's fault. So, their numbers were good the first couple weeks. They were not as good last week. I'm very curious to see where the O-line grades come out tomorrow. I would not be surprised if they're the worst that they've had this season, and that would be saying something because last week was pretty bad.
Pretty bad.
But But that is something that they are going to need to figure out going forward. And like, it's like, that's their starting group. And they've held pretty strong in playing that starting group through every single snap this season. I wasn't paying too close attention near the end when they started to cycle some guys in. I don't know if they changed the line near the end of the game, but certainly for like almost every snap Kyle was playing, save for an early drive where Josh Aloa played center and then some snaps where Enrique Cruz was in.
Mm-hmm.
It's that starting line group, and they need to figure something out with it because that's not going to work down the line.
The pass protection, unfortunately, Enrique Cruz just he blew him one assignment, and guy got right by him, just knocked down McCord before McCord even knew what was happening, right?
On a third down, too, I think.
On a third down. And Fran brought it up, Emily, after the game that, maybe that was a mistake. I'm paraphrasing what he said here, but they were mixing in guys maybe before they should have. You mentioned Aloa got in at center. We're like, is Reed hurt? He was on the sideline without his helmet for a minute there, but no, he came back in the next series. Cruz mixed in there. So, and I remember reading a couple stories about this in the offseason. I know we've talked about it, that in the portal era, it's so hard to get an offensive line in sync. Remember, you brought in Savion Washington late, and you brought in Big Spoon, and I'm sorry, like, you've got to do the best you can with that. I know that's not ideal to mix in guys to the offensive line, and I'm not saying that's part of it because these are big dudes that are not pushing around. As Fran Brown likes to say, big people push little people around. I did not see that enough against Holy Cross, and we haven't seen it enough all year, frankly. So that's the pass protection. Kyle did what he could in scrambling out, and maybe Stanford showed something that teams are really honing in on here. I'll have to watch the film, as players like to say. But to transition to the running game a little bit, Emily, they got 125 yards today. LaQuinn Allen was more involved today. Unfortunately, Will Nixon he was back, but he got banged up again at the end of the game. It looks like a new injury.
He limped off.
He limped off the field. He was dealing with a quad issue, but this looks like a new situation. And I know through a source that he had an X-ray after the game that was negative, so that's good news in a sense. But he's banged up, right? And my guy, you've seen Willis gets in, and you would think Holy Cross is a team that he's going to go in there and at least kind of run over and get some big numbers and some big yards. And we didn't see it to the extent maybe we thought we would, but they were also really active with LaQuinn Allen in the passing game today. So I'm kind of curious how much they balance that out going forward. They talked after the game. It was good to get some balance between the run and the pass. And I don't know if I saw that balance the way maybe that works against Holy Cross, but I don't know. That running game still to me is a bit of a mystery, Emily. If they can go out there and really set the tone, set the line, and push a team around and run the football. I mean, Kyle McCord threw the ball 50 times today, and he kind of had to, right?
Yeah. Here is kind of where I came to the run-pass balance situation and some LaQuinn stuff post-game. I pulled some numbers as I was writing my first sidebar. You can't ask for both LaQuinn and Kyle to have big games at the same time. If McCord's going to be throwing 300 yards, LaQuinn is probably not breaking 100, definitely not breaking like 150 or whatever we would hope for him to get at a large scale. And, I went through LaQuinn's numbers through the first 5 weeks, which obviously last year was 5 games. And then this year is 4 games because they had the early bye. Yards after catch. No, not yards after catch. Yards per carry. Sorry, I just put a Y versus C, and I'm running off anagrams. Yards per carry, he was averaging 4.8 yards last year through week 5, 5.3 this year. Yards per game, average 72.6 last year, 71.8 this year. Attempts per game, he was averaging 15.2 last year, 13.5 this year. So he's pretty on
he's on track. Yeah, that's surprising.
He's on par with what his numbers were last year. And I totally get that it doesn't feel that way. It does feel like we're not seeing a ton of him in the ground game. Does feel like there should be more of him. But when you have a healthy quarterback and a receiving core like they do this year, like this is, I think, the balance that we're going to strike each game is that between LaQuinn and the other 2 backs that we mentioned, it's going to be like a 100-yard to 150 rushing yard game. And then you're going to see Kyle and the receivers carry it the rest of the way, unless they're truly forced to pick one side or the other based on the defense they're seeing. But we haven't really seen that be the case outside of maybe the Stanford game this year. So LeQuint's on track, even if it doesn't feel like he is. I know we're still kind of waiting for like a big 100-yard game. He hasn't had one of those yet, but just wanted to put a little context around that because I thought I was surprised when I pulled the numbers.
I'm glad you did. And what you said makes a ton of sense, that it's a lot to ask for Kyle and LeQuint to both be the guy.
Yeah.
But I'll say this, they both can be the guy against Holy Cross. Like, that's a game you can
That's fair.
do that.
That's fair.
But where they were smart about it is, look, we've got to get LeQuint Allen the football one way or the other. He's better in the passing game, so let's do that. He made one great catch on one of their scoring drives. Like, he saved that drive by going up and grabbing one essentially one-handed out of it could have been an overthrow easily from McCord, and he saved that. So look, get LeQuint Allen on the field, get him involved one way or the other. Maybe it's not going to be 3 yards in a cloud of dust that we visualize, but he's a weapon and he needs to be utilized out there. That was good context there with those numbers, and we'll see how that is going forward. All right, Emily, let's see what the people are saying. The text line certainly was very passionate today during the game, and our Syracuse Sports Insiders are always welcome to text at 315-847-3895. It's just $3.99 a month to be a Syracuse Sports Insider, which gives you direct text message access to us. And I send you texts, you send me texts, and information, observation, opinion, anything you guys want to ask us about Syracuse football and basketball just around the corner with that season coming. Being a Syracuse Sports Insider gives you direct text message access to us. I mentioned we've got the big meetup coming up in Vegas where a lot of our Syracuse Sports Insiders are going to be. And you guys have been fantastic as always, and they get their comments highlighted exclusively here on the postgame show and the podcast, including from Jack, who says, if you look at the stats, the game turned out about how it should, but if you actually watch the game, it was pretty disappointing, which I think was the point we were making earlier.
Anecdotally subpar, statistically on point.
Frank F. says, it's odd to say after a 42-14 win, but Syracuse was lucky they were playing Holy Cross. Way too many mistakes, blown coverages, 3 missed field goals, and a ton of incompletions. From Randy, who says, Brent, this is more of a get wrong game than a get right game. The offense did enough to win for sure, but it looks like this is going to have to be a pass-first offense. And Randy adds this, the field goal kicking is now just downright concerning. It'll be interesting to see what they do going into Vegas on Friday. They just haven't played a consistent game all year. Emily, I think that's a good way to put it because, again, these are the types of games where narratives have to come true. They didn't get right against Holy Cross. This was not a reset. This was not a deep exhale. This was not a, that happened against Stanford, but, baby, we felt good today. Usually you walk away from these games like you won 56-3 and it's like you had a Snickers bar. Like, it's empty calories. You're satisfied for the moment, but you shouldn't be satisfied overall. In this case, you ate the Snickers bar and it gave you a stomach ache. Like, this was not a get right game. That was a proper narrative to put out there because it's the type of game it should have been, and it did not turn out to be, as our insiders are certainly noting here. From Chip, who says go ahead.
I was just going to say, we had kind of said going into this game that probably the only way we were going to learn something is if they lost, and we were wrong because they did win, but I feel like we did learn some things.
You know what? We jinxed it, Emily. When Emily and I were walking into the dome.
I got my score prediction very close.
This is true. Your score was very close. But we were walking in the dome. Emily and I were just like, let's just have a normal day, right?
Yeah.
Noon kickoff.
Afternoon.
Take care of business. Get everything wrapped up and take a deep breath before Vegas, which it kind of was, but there were some moments there where we were just like, what are we watching right now? Chip notes the defense was dominant in the second half. Offense left a lot of questions. Gadsden looks almost disinterested. Haynes is a big loss for now. Field goal kicking, yuck. How about Jaden Bellamy? We got to give him a shout out because there was a couple of times in the game.
Yes.
He got around the football. He got his hands on the football. Unfortunately, didn't come down with it, but made up for that in the second half. Pick 6, When you're around the ball that much, where there's smoke, there's fire, and he took advantage of that. And it was interesting to hear what Fran said about Bellamy after the game, Emily.
Yeah, he said that he had kind of talked to him going into practice this week and was like, I need to see more from you. Obviously, last week they lost Martellus Barnes for that game, and then he sat out this game. He's dealing with back spasms. I think it was smart to sit him in this situation, regardless of how close to ready he was or if he was ready at all. But asked for Bellamy to step up, and it's interesting because like Bellamy is the veteran guy in that cornerback room, meaning that like he's been here the longest. He transferred in last season and had been around and played that role. Whereas Clarence Lewis and Devin Grant and Marcellus Barnes are all new, but he hasn't really been the number one guy this season. And that was mostly Grant and Lewis, and, Barnes, honestly, I feel like got more play than he did. So Fran said he asked him to step up, and, Bellamy kind of shrugged it off a little bit when asked about it. I'm sure it's not great to have strangers asking you, like, were you not giving enough energy in practice? Like, why did Fran have to say that to you? But we did ask those questions, and he did give answers. So yeah, hopefully we'll hear a little bit more about that from him this week or some of his teammates. He led in tackles too, so I was going to bring that up, as he had 5 tackles to lead the team.
Another big performance on defense. We noted it earlier, but I got to mention again, King Joseph Edwards comes out. Now I know it's Holy Cross, and I know it's the second half, and you're starting to wind down. But dude had 3 sacks and showed he can get to the quarterback. And this is a team that needs pass rush. Fidel Diggs had a quiet day. The pass rush overall had a quiet day. People were very frustrated with the fact on the Syracuse Sports Text Insider line that they were only rushing 3 a lot in this game. It was interesting. You noted it, Emily, that Elijah Robinson was on the field this time. He had been in the
which
booth.
I believe was a change. Yeah,
that was a change. So they know it, and they know they've got to fix it. And Justin Barron, of course, was at linebacker more today, and that defense continues to be a work in progress. They did lock it down in the second half. I'll give them that, but there were some open spots for receivers, more than Holy Cross should have. They ran a trick play, and that worked like a charm. And you had another touchdown, the other one for Holy Cross, where you had number 13 for Holy Cross just taking a stroll in the park, wide open, and nobody had him. So there were some breakdowns there that they got to go back and check out for sure. A couple more from our Syracuse Sports Insiders, including Nick, who says, bright spots today for sure, but a lot of work that needs to be done. There's absolutely no way you can keep King Joseph off the field. He basically forced their hand today. Different Nick F. this time says, my biggest question is the disappearance of Gadsden. Just not sure what the disconnect is there, but I'm not quite as negative about the win as you are. Certainly, he's talking about me. Certainly they didn't play well for stretches of the game, but I still feel like they're finding themselves, and we'll see ups and downs week to week. I still see 8-4. You know what, Emily? Fair, but it's game 4. Like, some of those things you're talking about, we shouldn't be excusing as much as we are, right? Some of that stuff is okay in game 1 and 2. It's game 4. So some of that stuff can't be brought up. They're still getting used to me. They're still learning. That's, in some ways, yes. In other ways, no.
Yes. And, I will bring this up now as we start to wind down the show. Newly without Matthew Sluka, UNLV did bring home a 59-14 conference win in the Mountain West over Fresno State tonight. So Matthew Sluka's disappearance did not blow the air out of their tires, did not deflate their wagon.
I was wondering about that, because when adversity like that hits, and that is a unique scenario for sure, right? It can either galvanize a team or it can tear it apart. And the immediate reaction was it galvanized them. Now they're confident, from all reports out there, Emily, that quarterback competition was tight. Remember, Sluka came in after the spring, and he's the guy they were allegedly going to pay $100,000 to. But the backup, Williams, they have a lot of confidence in him. He's a water bug. He's going to give Syracuse fits running the football in that game next week. And now they're feeling it a bit. They got to win. But here's where I think Syracuse has a big advantage in that game. All the attention is on UNLV. Fox Sports game, Friday night, all the narratives, the talk, the storyline, all the noise and the buzz. It's all about them. It's all about them and what went wrong here. And I mean, national media, How often do you hear Reese Davis talking about UNLV on game day? Had a pointed commentary about that today. And how they handle that noise is going to be fascinating to me, where Syracuse is going to come in. And Vegas is a very hard place to focus, as it will be for us when we're there next week. But we'll get it done. But it's a short week. And Syracuse, I thought, would play angrier today based on what happened against Stanford. But at the very least, all the extracurricular stuff is going to be all on the other side of the field, and Syracuse can just come in and play football. So take advantage of that as best you can.
Our last UNLV note before we return to close out this game, and in terms of the extracurriculars, that I will reassure everyone that we have been told Syracuse is treating next week as a normal game week. There's not going to be like bowl week type activities where they're out and about doing things. Like, they are locked in on that game, and they are going to treat it normally, which is, I think, how you want that to be handled, even if it might be fun to go see them at like M&M World or something like
in the hardest city in the world to do that. I will be fascinated how they do that. It's a hard place to just sit in your hotel room.
Lock them in the room. Just give them some extra snacks and lock them in the hotel room.
When you're in Vegas, which we'll talk a bit more about certainly throughout the week. But let's remind our friends in a moment here about a fun event that we're doing in Vegas. Before that, though, speaking of fun, though, Emily, to the bullpen we go. Admittedly, our friend Rock and Ron, a little too distraught last week, couldn't put the thoughts together for a voicemail. That's okay. Ron needs a bye week once in a while just to get it together. This week, though, how about my man? Now, the hurricane, thankfully, did not come through on his side of the state of Florida, and he's okay, and everybody is okay. But again, we're thinking about everybody down there. It's a terrible situation for a lot of people. Through a hurricane, Rock and Ron hits the voicemail line. Let's see what he had for us today. There it is.
Hey, Brett, Rock and Ron, Florida. Hello, Emily. Sorry I didn't contact you last week. It was probably a good thing. You'd have to bleep out every other word. Well, this week, I'm glad we got out early and scored some points. We kept shooting ourselves in the foot. The O-line still needs some more work on the O-line. And McCord, not the best day in his neighborhood, throwing, what was it, 23 passes out of 50. Missed a lot of open receivers. Well, at least we won this game. The D looked pretty good overall. And again, a little bend, but not break in the beginning. Trick play. One of the defensive backs missed his play, and the guy got wide open for a touchdown. But other than that, they look great, defense. And kudos out to our man King Joseph for three sacks. He's our future. So, you know, I'll take this win no matter which way it is. Hope we improve on it. And thanks a lot. Until then, till next week. Later, guys.
There he is, folks. The man, the myth, the legend. Through a hurricane, Rock and Ron on the voicemail line. Emily, Vegas awaits. We are very excited to be heading to Las Vegas. We're going to have some extra content, stories, on-the-ground coverage. Uncle Brent's making the trip. That's when you know it's a big deal. I know Syracuse is treating it like another game week, but we are not.
That's true.
We are not. We're going all in.
In the content.
We are up in the content. We're taking the chips and we're putting them right in the middle of the table, baby. We're going all in. So one exciting thing is our meetup. We would love for you to come by the Rock House and Oak Room Bar. It's in the Venetian on the Strip, Thursday night, 5 o'clock. So you can come pregame with us before you go to whatever shows you're going to. We had some people say, hey, you know, I'm going to the Sphere, which, by the way, the Rock House and Oak Room Bar in the Venetian, it's right there. Like, you can come hang out with us before. Then if you're going to a show at the Sphere or on the Strip, you're not going to miss a thing. It is all right there. So we're going to get together. We're going to have some drinks. We're going to have some food. We're going to talk some football. and we would love for you to come by. So if you're going to Vegas and you're a Syracuse football fan that wants to hang with other Syracuse football fans, maybe say hello to Emily and myself. We will be there Thursday night. No, cool thing, the Rock House and Oak Room Bar is managed by Eric Ashodi. Shout out to Eric, who hooked us up. If you're from Syracuse, that name might ring a bell for you. The Ashodi family, spectacular meatballs, amongst many other things you can get at Ashodi's Meats. But those meat the balls, they are the best. So you're going to have a Syracuse guy hanging with us in Vegas. We got a connection. So we thank Eric for his help and looking forward to hanging at his place on Thursday. But Emily, we're going to see what we can do for the people out there in Vegas. Content-wise, some extra stories, some videos, some social media stuff. And I don't know, maybe you might have to wander in somewhere and place a little wager on the Buffalo Bills. I don't know. Did I say that out loud? I don't, maybe. We'll see. We'll see. But I've never been to Vegas, and I am looking forward to being overwhelmed by everything.
Yes,
for sure.
It's going to be interesting on a work trip. I have said my grandparents used to live there, so I went several times as a child. But the last time I was there, I was 12 years old. So I'm sure at 24, it's going to be a very different experience. And on a work trip, it'll be a very different experience.
Work trip. I have to keep reminding myself of that. Work trip. So we're looking forward to that. And we're looking forward to seeing you guys out there in Viva Las Vegas. Thank you so much in the meantime for hanging with us tonight. Syracuse beats Holy Cross 42-14. This has been Syracuse Sports Postgame presented by Krause Health, the exclusive healthcare partner for Syracuse Athletics. For Emily Leiker, I'm Brent Axe. You're you. Have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll talk to you soon, guys.